his approach to business and his approach to governing is terrible for the economy. It's terrible for a business climate to have the president interfering in businesses or taking over corporations or taking shares in corporations or telling corporations who they should fire or where they should get their products or laying on tariffs and then taking off tariffs, etc. Those are things that are bad for business.
First to the United States, where after praising the indictment of the former FBI director James Comey, Donald Trump is now widening his attacks. The US president is hoping to see the prosecution of the billionaire Democratic donor George Soros and his philanthropic network, the Open Society Foundations. Last week it was revealed that the Justice Department had been instructed to draft plans to investigate the OSF. Dozens of non-profits have condemned this. So what guardrails are there in place to control the president and his use of the Justice Department and his fiefdom? Let's speak to Paul Schiff Berman, the Walter S. Cox Professor of Law at the George Washington University School of Law. Paul, welcome to the programme.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. What do you make of where things are going? Did people predict that Trump would be so energetic, so determined to go after his political opponents and people who don't directly confront him, like Soros, in this way?
I would say that this and other acts of the administration have been shocking and have gone much further than I think even his fiercest critics thought they would. To have, as you just said in your intro, to have the president instruct the Department of Justice to bring the full force of the police force of the United States, the FBI, the criminal justice apparatus of the federal government against someone he deems to be an enemy is really unprecedented in American history. The idea that the president should even instruct the Justice Department of anything is problematic, but certainly to go and prosecute his enemies. And in this case, when there was a U.S. attorney, a career officer, who said there's not enough evidence, I can't do it, he essentially fired that person and installed someone who was a political loyalist with no experience, who drafted this indictment all by herself, with no help from the career staff who didn't think that there were grounds to do it. So we really have what looks like a very, very politically targeted prosecution, which is truly terrible for a democracy.
Well, it's one thing to announce you're looking into somebody, another to indict them, and then another still to get them before a court and indeed before a jury. Which of Trump's targets do you think has most grounds to be concerned? Soros is 95 years old. He's a billionaire, far richer than Trump. He supports what he calls open society across the world. The likes of Viktor Orban from Hungary, Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel, India's foreign minister, Janishankar, don't like him, nor does Vladimir Putin. We're beginning to build up a picture here.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some sense, none of them should necessarily be worried that they are going to be prosecuted and convicted, right? So this is an indictment against James Comey, but it's very thin. It's a 2-page indictment. It has very little in the way of factual allegations to support the charge. And I wouldn't be surprised if a judge throws it out before trial. And I certainly wouldn't be surprised if a jury refuses to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. I doubt they have enough evidence. So it's not so much that Comey or George Soros is necessarily going to get convicted of anything. But, being prosecuted by the federal government is a big deal. You have to hire lawyers. You're under a cloud. You can't do certain financial transactions that you might want to do. You might not be able to travel the way you might otherwise do, and so forth. And it really does have a chilling effect. Even as I speak to you right now, it occurs to me that because I'm saying what I'm saying, Trump, if he knows about it, could decide that he wants the Justice Department to look into anything I've ever done in my life. And that's really problematic for a democracy, that people are afraid now to cross the president. So it's not so much that I think Soros is going to really be convicted of anything. And as you say, he's 95 and has plenty of money and so on and so forth. But I think the message that's being sent to anyone around the country who defies the president or criticizes the president or leads an opposition against the president or files a lawsuit against the president or, as we saw, tells a joke on national television against the president is going to be targeted by this government or might be targeted by this government. And that is really a terrible testament for a democracy.
So who does it fall to then to take up this challenge, to say to the president, you're not a king, you're not an emperor, you're an elected individual, you will leave office in just over 3 years. If it's not the Democratic Party, if it's not judges, if it's not fellow billionaires who are outraged at what's happening to the Constitution, is it going to fall to Jane Fonda, who has relaunched something called the Committee for the First Amendment, which was started by her father during the McCarthy era?
Well, I mean, I guess all I will say is that I wouldn't totally say it's not judges. Lower court judges around the country, appointed by Democratic presidents and appointed by Republican presidents, are actually making a pretty strong stand against illegalities of the Trump administration. But many of their decisions have been overturned or put on hold by the U.S. Supreme Court. So you're right that courts in general haven't been a great bulwark, but I would say there are a lot of judges who are trying. Really, members of the Republican Party who know better should be distancing themselves from Trump and talking to him, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Or major business leaders, Silicon Valley leaders who have billions of dollars, rather than trying to kowtow to Trump and curry favor with him, should be telling him that his approach to business and his approach to governing is terrible for the economy. It's terrible for a business climate to have the president interfering in businesses or taking over corporations or taking shares in corporations or telling corporations who they should fire or where they should get their products or laying on tariffs and then taking off tariffs, et cetera. Those are things that are bad for business. So it seems to me that there are a lot of leaders who are too afraid right now to say anything, but the powerful ones who have a lot of money shouldn't be so afraid.
Right. And what about the Democratic Party? Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, the Shadow House Speaker, they've been criticized for being too soft, too bipartisan. However, apparently they're not playing ball when it comes to the shutdown. That's why it's gone ahead. Are they finally now responding to the criticism, the torrent of criticism, that they need to realize they're not dealing with a conventional president, they're dealing with what Professor Cornel West called a gangster in the White House?
I think it's very clear to certainly a large segment of the American populace how dangerous Trump is. He's quite unpopular. And I think people, in the UK need to understand that this is kind of a takeover of America by someone who really doesn't have that much support. Certainly not support for the kind of authoritarian regime that he is now trying to institute.
Although, Paul,
he
did say, I am carrying out what I told people I would do, and 70 how many million people voted for it in November last year.
It is true.
Yeah.
It is true.
And even if his popularity, even if his figures are now in the low 30s, he's only what is not even a year into his term, and he will say, I've got time, I'm going to finish the job, trust the process. And a lot of MAGA individuals and Republicans more generally say, hey, we trust him, this is what we want.
That is true. All of that is true, but it is hard to maintain this kind of control over a country when 2/3 of the populace is opposed to what you're doing, even if some of those people did in fact vote for him. And we also have a system that is a federalist system, which means that many states can also form a bulwark of resistance, and we're seeing some of that. I think, Schumer and Jeffries are hearing from their base that they need to be more of a force. And I think it's not their natural inclination. They are kind of inside baseball, kind of inside politics people who are good at crafting deals, but not necessarily great at leading a resistance.
Yep. All right.
And right now, I think people are clamoring for more resistance. And so they're trying to do it. I'm not sure they're quite the right people to be carrying that banner, though, from a public relations point of view. And we'll have to see who emerges within the Democratic Party to really carry that banner forward.
Paul, thank you very much. It's great having your expertise in the programme. Paul Schiff Berman, the Walter S. Cox Professor of Law at the George Washington University School of Law. It's Henry Bonsu on a Thursday night on Times Radio.